Welcome to this episode of The Good, The Bad and The Odd One Out with your host Mark. These are unusual episodes. I'm usually in The Odd One Out. These days I'm recapping series or half series and things like that. Most often it's Star Trek, but I haven't done one in quite a while. But this one is one I wanted to cover because I'm slowly working through the entire back catalogue. It's going to be a labour of love. This one, it is Doctor Who. And I want to talk about the first season of Doctor Who. When I say first season, I don't mean Christopher Eccleston. I mean first William Hartnell. Okay, so I think there are 7 different stories within this season. So I'm just going to give a quick recap of each of my thoughts about it. However, I'll give you an overview of Doctor Who first. It was actually originally commissioned because the head of drama was looking for a programme that could slot between some of the younger viewer programming in the sort of late afternoon on Saturdays, and the older viewer programming, which is going into the early evening in the evening. They wanted something to fill in that slot where we're transitioning from younger to older, so they wanted something that would appeal to both age ranges or a wide age range. And they conceived of something involving adventures in time and space. Really, it was about, the plan was they wanted to make it educational. So what they wanted to do was have a show that alternated, covering something about Earth's past with something about the future, not necessarily Earth, but something about the future, and possibly in that other area, non-Earth related, and also alternate realities as well. So they wanted to kind of try and set up an alternating structure, but the strongest one being they wanted to alternate something about Earth's past with a future episode of some sort. So it actually aired, the first story was called An Unearthly Child, and it aired on the 23rd of November 1963, which unfortunately was the day President Kennedy got shot dead. That led to a bit of conflict in terms of its airing. It did air, but it was repeated. The very first episode was repeated the next week because a lot of people were sort of distracted by what was going on around then, and I thought it needed a bit of a chance, and actually picked up quite a number of viewers. It was also, interestingly, production was overseen by the BBC's very first female producer, Verity Lambert, a sort of titan among Whovians for what she did, and overseen by story editor David Whittaker. The head of drama was called Sidney Newman, and the head of serials was Donald Wilson, who kind of had a hand in it, but so did many other people. The casting was interesting. They had offered it to various other actors who turned it down for whatever reason. Someone didn't want to get involved in a serial that may be long running. Others didn't want to be cast in that kind of role. And it fell to William Hartnell, who was famous at the time for doing stuff like tough guy roles or gruff roles. And he wanted to try something a little different. So he was interested. And somehow there was this conception that I think came from the very first script, which was called The Giants, which they felt they just couldn't do in time. So they lifted elements of that script into this one. That's where the idea of the police box, travelling police box, came out. And this one was pretty interesting. It introduced 3 companions, as it were. The first one was Susan, who is credited as Doctor's granddaughter. Interesting, because the Doctor really doesn't have familial ties much at all in any other way to any other characters, with the exception of possibly one in David Tennant's era, which I'll leave for now. But she is introduced as his granddaughter, and in many respects he's kind of treated as human. Now, this is retconned later in Doctor Who. He's a Time Lord, and occasionally he does make references to Ian and the other companions to being humans like other people rather than himself. So this kind of a bit weird. And also Susan is portrayed as being a bit weird and alien, certainly in the first few episodes. being otherworldly, not knowing about things she shouldn't, stuff like that. Which is why her teachers, Ian Chester and Barbara Wright, which are the other two companions, kind of get curious about it and go and visit. Can't find her in her address, but find this police box, and when they get in it, they kind of find it's not what they thought it was, and they go off into adventures. And that's the first episode, is all about that setup, with them going away and landing in this place that turns out to be Stone Age Earth. As I said, there was a script in mind for them called The Giants, but it was felt technically too difficult, so they moved this Unearthly Child one, which wasn't given a title at the time. They were trying to figure it out. They gave it that title eventually, before it kicked off. Now, I actually think the first story, Unearthly Child, is pretty solid. It's a schlocky kind of drama thriller, really. There's no big themes in it. They're stuck with cavemen. Cavemen have power struggles. I quite liked it. It held your attention. It was 4 episodes long, so it was pretty solid. I mean, the titles of the episodes were kind of designed to entice, a bit like the old movie serials like Flash Gordon. For example, there was an episode called The Cave of Skulls and The Forest of Fear and stuff like that. Written by Anthony Coburn, and as I say, very first one aired 1963. Oh, actually, interesting point aside I wanted to mention, this was directed by Waris Hussain, who was a British Indian director, who went on to make a few interesting films. One I particularly like and can recommend, called Melody. Quite nice little slice of London life among the sort of London schoolboys in the early 70s. Really, really a charming film. And one of the few films he made. So I rate him as a director of people, and I think that comes through in this. I think it was well acted and well written and so on, and I kind of like what was going on here. But yeah, it's a good opening starter for what was going on. So that aired until the 14th of December. The next story was when Doctor Who kind of skyrocketed in the popular consciousness because it involved the Daleks. The Daleks, we all know the Daleks. It was quite amazing that they hit this so early. Now, the sort of two heads of drama, Newman and Wilson, did not want this story. Newman was quite adamant and said at early doors to Verity Lambert, I don't want any bug-eyed monsters in this, and then he was presented this script. But due to no other scripts being ready, and they really didn't have any choice, they had to go ahead with this, even though Newman grumbled somewhat. However, it turned out to be a massive success. These were the creation of the writer Terry Nation, and proved to be massively successful and spurned something called Dalek Mania. People went crazy for Daleks. Interestingly, Terry Nation was sort of inspired to write this story by both the story of the Nazis, because this isn't that far behind World War II, right? At the end of World War II, the nature of the Nazis. And also the War of the Worlds. There's elements of War of the Worlds, the Morlocks and stuff like that, in with this Dalek thing. And there was a bigger theme in all of this. There's like pacifism versus active rebellion and stuff like that. And the Daleks were very Nazi-ish and robotic, and their whole attitude was and is, they're the master race. They control everything. So this aired on the 21st of December. What a Christmas present. I don't think the Daleks appeared in the first ever episode, but they certainly appeared in the second onwards. It ran for 7 episodes, this one story, and got massive ratings. Just to give you an idea, the highest rated episode in the first series, the first story, Unearthly Child, was 6.9 million. The Daleks, it went up to 10.5 million. By the last few episodes, they really, really added to the sort of kudos and popularity of Doctor Who. Now, it was getting pretty good reviews at this time, so that was kind of cool. The next story spanned only 2 episodes. It was really a bottle episode to save some money. Written by David Whittaker too, and it was basically on the set of the TARDIS. So they had to create drama. What it was, it felt a bit like a ghost story or a mystery. There was something going on at the TARDIS, and people were accusing each other of this, and it was kind of study of paranoia as well. Really quite liked it. Really thought it was quite well done considering the limitations they were given. It was almost, you could present it almost as a stage act. It was that kind of bottle episode. Edge of Destruction. So no complaints from me about this one. I kind of like this. I should have mentioned that the 3 companions actually stay with the Doctor through the entire season here, so we'll have no changes of cast of that type. That does happen in later series quite a bit, but not so far. Carol Ann Ford, who was the actress playing Susan, she started off as a very odd and interesting and weird character, but at this point she was starting to become like a slightly hysterical damsel in distress, which Carol Ann Ford did complain about. She wanted her character to have more weight to it, but that was never really developed and did lead to some dissatisfaction in the second season of Doctor Who, that led to certain, her leaving and new companions coming in. But the 4 main leads at this point are interacting quite well, though sometimes their conversations are a little abrupt and odd and not quite coherent. I think that's down to different writers being told what the characters are like, and no one having an overarching idea of continuity. There was no particular showrunner, I think, was possibly a bit of an issue, or no one really had the power to be the showrunner, perhaps, is more like it. The next story is called Marco Polo. Now, almost all of the episodes here, and there were 7 of them, were directed by Waris Hussain, with one exception. The one smack bang in the middle, number 4, was directed by John Crockett. And written by John Lucarotti, who actually had written stuff about Marco Polo, dramatisations about Marco Polo before, so he seemed like the perfect person to bring in at this point. And this entire run rated quite highly. Unfortunately, the series was wiped from the BBC archives, so all that remains is audio footage, which audio or in entirety, to be fair, but it's just audio integrated with possibly snapshots of what was going on set. Makes it very difficult to judge. It felt a bit wordy just listening to it. It felt a bit radio drama, in fact, which it would, I guess. But there's all sorts of shenanigans about going to Kublai Khan, someone wanting to assassinate Kublai Khan, and Marco Polo taking the TARDIS as a gift for Kublai Khan, so they have to kind of go along with him and stuff like that. Yeah, okay. Couldn't watch it, had to listen to it. It was okay. It wasn't particularly outstanding. Don't have any complaints. Would rather have seen it. That probably would have made it a much better experience. But yeah, that is what it is. As we're going through this and alternating between sort of Earth's past history and future stuff, we now get into another future story. So this is The Keys of Marinus. This went across 6 episodes, and it has quite exploitation sounding titles for some of the episodes. For example, The Screaming Jungle, The Snows of Terror, The Sentence of Death, stuff like that. These were entirely written by Terry Nation, again, the one who did all the Dalek stuff, so I had high hopes. Directed by John Gorrie, all of them. Again, the ratings stood up but started to slack off towards the end of this, and it is a little disjointed. I think it was envisioned as like each episode was going to be its own little mini adventure. They were hunting for these certain keys through places and over hills and over dales, all that. But it, unfortunately, when you watch it as one unit, it feels quite fractured. It doesn't quite work as well as it could, and made it a little disengaging. And I think that was kind of reflected in the drop in ratings towards the end of the series. So I have a few problems with Keys of Marinus. It was okay, but nowhere near as engaging as, say, the Daleks episode, or even Unearthly Child or Edge of Destruction. So, yeah. The next one is The Aztecs. Here, written by Gianluca Lucarotti, again, interestingly, who did the Marco Polo stuff. I guess he was somewhat of an historian. This was over 4 episodes, and I think the contraction of episodes helped a lot. This feels punchy and got some interesting stuff. There's quite a lot of debate about changing Earth history because Barbara just finds the human sacrifice abominable and wants to stop it, and she gets recognised as a god for some reason for how they appear and so on, and wants to stop this practice. The Doctor warns against trying to interfere with history, that this will have dire consequences, but she will not listen. Meanwhile, there's a priest who suspects she's not what she says she is and is up to shenanigans. I like this. It was a little pantomime in terms of the drama, and a little Machiavellian and overblown bad guys and stuff like that, but I like the vibe a lot. I think this was a really solid story. Actually, I really enjoyed it quite a lot. I think it might be my second favourite after the Daleks. In fact, that's how much I like it. I think there's some solid stuff going on here, and good recommend. And interestingly, the ratings started to pick up a little through this, so that's good news. The next story, again, we go back into future and more sci-fi than Earth history. It's called The Sensorites. This ran for 6 episodes, and I think it suffered a little because the story was not enough for 6 episodes. I think it should have been a 4-episode thing. Certainly the opening episodes are very interesting, where they've got this intriguing mystery and they've got to figure it out, and they find humans, and one's quite heavily traumatized. Quite a good acting job from the actor dealing with that, and there's some interesting stuff. The Sensorites are fairly passive, odd creatures in some ways, and they all look very similar as well, but the first few episodes have got a definite clear creepy vibe and work quite well, but then once it gets to the mundane stuff, it's not as good. I like the idea of an alien race using psychic abilities to defend themselves. That was kind of cool. Things we see stuff like that in Star Trek, right, of the same era. So I thought it was a little overstretched. The battle was spread a little too thin for this one, but not bad. It was okay. Which brings us to the last story in this particular season. This is the Reign of Terror set at the time of Robespierre and stuff like that, and Napoleon, in fact. Written by Dennis Spooner. Dennis Spooner's interesting, right? He did a lot of stuff for the Avengers, the Steed and Emma Peel stuff. But he turned his hand here. Now, 2 of these episodes have been lost. We've only got the sound for them, but there are 4 others where we have got the video as well. So that's enough to give you a feel for it. Yeah, I thought this was okay. It got a bit soap opera in places, but it was fairly action packed, and the drama was tense and kind of interesting, and it was about rescuing aristocrats or sort of resisting the terror, as it were. And there's also even shenanigans with Robespierre and Napoleon to boot as well. So, and I should have also mentioned there's also this backdrop of the Doctor being quite vexed that he can't get them back to their own time, because he's kind of irritated that Ian and Barbara thinks he doesn't know what he's doing, because he keeps landing in odd places. So there is a bit of that. But yeah, pretty solid closing episode. Of the episode's stories here, the Daleks is obviously the top one, but I think the Unearthly Child and the Aztecs are very solid too. I quite like the bottle episode as well. The bottle story. That was kind of fun, but not so keen on the Keys of Marinus or the Sensorites, really. Marco Polo I really can't call a judgment on, because we had no video at all. It was kind of listened to a very old-fashioned radio drama was the feel of it. I think you need to see some of this stuff rather than listen to it. That's the problem. So interesting stuff going on. Susan is definitely sometimes a damsel in distress, as is Barbara sometimes. So I think Barbara has more agency than Susan, perhaps, as presented. Ian doesn't have any problems. He has agency all the time, pretty much. It's a thing of its time, I guess, in some ways. I thought this was a pretty good opening season, and you can kind of see why Doctor Who kept going after it. Hartnell was interesting as a Doctor, grumpy sometimes, a little. He did forget his lines now and again. You could kind of tell, but they worked around it. So there was that, but and occasionally he sort of disappears from the screen for fairly long times as well. I think he had 4 seasons in him, or certainly 3 and a bit. In the end, so that was he had a reasonably good run as the Doctor, and we'll get to those eventually. So yes, I really quite enjoyed these. They are a thing of their time. The drama is a lot slower than what we're used to in the last 20-30 years, but it's a thing of its time and interesting. I just have to mention that Doctor Who, I also believe, was quite inspired by an earlier series of Quatermass. In fact, Nigel Neal, the creator of Quatermass, often claimed Doctor Who was a ripping off his stuff left, right and centre, and it kind of, maybe, certainly in some stories, I don't think any in this particular run were ripping him off, but I think the premise of this roving scientist figure is a bit Quatermassy. I can sort of see elements in there, so yeah. So I'd say I recommend for this first season for me. Shame there's some missing. There's even more missing as we get into later series, which is a bit depressing. It is there, right? Okay, so that's it from me. So bye till next time.